Wow.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Awesome. Aaron.
Yes.
You founded the design firm Capsule, but your design firm means something a little bit different than a lot of the design firms of the people in the room.
Right.
So get us started. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do, how you're designing for brands?
Right. So I have a research background, and my partner has a design background. So we've combined those two disciplines together to create a design firm. But we design brands. We don't design spaces. We partner with people that design spaces and have wonderful conversations with people who design spaces because we design the brands that show up in those spaces. So it's a little bit variation on the idea, but design is everywhere. Design is everything, and everything is designed, right? Hopefully. Well, something's not very well designed, but we can talk about that.
You also wrote a book. It's called The Physics of Brand, and you outlined a new way of thinking about brand building. So can you tell us a little bit about really the science and I guess the physics of what makes a good brand?
Yeah, I have two co-authors, Renee Marino and Dan Wallace, and we started off on this endeavor to write, go all the way back. The world of physics, or physics can be applied. If that's for me, I can, no, kidding. Am I supposed to push this? Oh, there it is. Perfect. Yeah, that book. We went down this deep, dark hole into the world of physics to figure out, physics is the science of everything, the science of nature. If you go all the way back, and because we were in a world of digital and physical and the design of experiences and the value of brands and all this swirling stuff around us, one person, Dan Wallace, coming out of advertising, me coming out of design, my co-author actually, she's the only rocket scientist I know. She did the math. She's the reason we can say physics, not me. So speaking of a fraud, as it relates to our Instagram fan, Jerry, I'm not a physicist. So we went down this path of connecting the value of brands to experiences and then doing the math, essentially. And that's what my co-author, Renee, did. She actually wrote software while we worked on the book to do the math, which is absolutely amazing to me.
What exactly are you measuring? Is it efficacy? Is it how well designed the brand is?
Right.
What is the math telling you about each of the brands you talked about?
That's a good question. We had to go all the way back into, we have three models, and I won't get into all three. I'll just get into the two biggest, which are space and time, right? If you get down to it, you have space and you have time. The one that I wanted to talk about here the more, or at least more often, was around the idea of time and the importance of time in our lives and what that does as it relates to the design of experiences and how important it is. And if you don't have a memory of a brand doesn't exist, right? And so this relates to, for instance, as we talk to the entrepreneurs in the audience, or people that are thinking about that or in that world, and you're trugging along and you're trying to get to your 10-year, your 5-year, whatever it is, it takes a while to get to that curve. You have to make enough memories, right? And most people, like if I ask you, how long has Yeti been around, right? The brand Yeti. Most people, maybe 5 years, right? They look like an overnight success. There's so many brands that look like overnight successes, but really 10 or 15 years before that, they started working on it, right? To get it built and created, and then it hits its curve. So the math was intense. Chapter 8 is off the charts intense. It's very densely packed because my co-author, Dan Wallace, is the editor, and he kills words for a living, so that's his business. Yeah, that's the physics of brand. It has been an amazing journey coming through that book.
Well, so you talked about you talked about time. Tell us a little bit about the space piece of that equation.
Yeah. So, for instance, and this, when I talk about this, and when I say space, you might think, well, spaces that you design. You also might think of outer space and the greatness of space. But there's some basic things. Like if you want to be successful with a consumer product in grocery, your most effective marketing device you can use is not Instagram, it's not Twitter, it's not Facebook, it's not any of the digital platforms. It is sampling. Getting the product in someone's mouth is what's going to lead to sales, or at least to trying it in some way, right? So what is that? That's proximity. That's space. That's being as close to the product or the brand as you possibly can be. And that applies in a lot of different places. It applies in your world of getting people into environments and spaces. I just heard from a restaurateur a week ago around the fact that he's done the numbers on time spent in the restaurant correlates to positive impact on revenue in the restaurant, right? Which, like, Okay, yeah, great. Yeah, they spend more time, they spend more money. If you look at it through the lens of McDonald's and fast food and that culture, no, right? McDonald's is actually, sorry if anybody's from McDonald's, but McDonald's is actually too fast. That's weird. Customers are telling them they're too fast, right? That's why I wanted to focus on time, because time is, for me, the thing we unveiled within this book, the fact that when a brand comes to life and the value of time with a brand, incredibly, profoundly more valuable than people realize. Especially when you look at like fast food restaurants, they want to get you out, right? My dad worked on some fast food restaurant design, and they just said, no, we don't want people to be comfortable. We want it to be cold, miserable, we want them to get their food and get out, right? We want to turn these tables.
Really interesting design brief.
Right. Now we want people to stay, enjoy, and spend more time.
What in the book and in your work in general, what are some of the assumptions that people come to their brand with that you challenge?
Whether a brand is a brand. One, people think sometimes that a brand is a logo, and if you're there, I'm sorry. The second place is they think, and even this, the first survey.
I'll say stop there for a second. You said if you think a brand is a logo, like you're wrong.
Right.
Tell us a little bit, what is a brand then?
Right.
What is a brand to you?
That's a good question. So a brand is a vessel. It's a vessel that you insert meaning, right, over time. You insert meaning into that vessel. So you say, this is my brand, right? You don't actually own it, though you can sell it. It's in the memories of your audiences, right? The first question when this conference was started, someone asked the question of how many people are designers, and that half the room or more, 60% raised their hands, right? And then the second question, how many people are from manufacturers or brands? No. If you have a design firm, you have a brand. If you are an entrepreneur putting something up, you have a brand. A brand is a brand, which is one of the things we challenge is people, if you ask people, when is a brand a brand? Right? When does it become a brand? When they advertise? When they have the trademark, which could be 3 years into their business or more? When is a brand a brand? It's the day you tell your mom, I started a company, I started a brand, right? Now you have a memory. It's probably not a big brand, and probably not a valuable brand yet, but over time it will be, right? So yeah, those are some of the things that, because people don't think about it that way naturally, but it is. Like, for instance, Enron is still a brand. Kind of weird to think about, right? I asked people, if you could go out, we tried to go buy the Enron brand as a thought experiment. They wouldn't let us. If you were to buy the Enron brand, what would you use it for? The best answer I've gotten so far is urinal cakes. Nothing better. If you've got something, I'd love to hear it. But yeah, I mean, a brand is a brand the minute it's out there in the world, and it starts to gain value if you're contributing to it and not just discounting yourself to death. Okay,
so you talk about contributing to it. What do those deposits into your brand look like? What can you do to grow that brand?
Right, that's good. The time is the piece I talk about, but within that, you've got moments. So the first moment of interaction. In life in general, we know that's valuable. For brands, it's so incredibly valuable. What's the first memory you have of a brand, right? And then how it aggregates over time, and does it have meaning? So we talk about in design, form, and function, but we got to add the third leg to the stool. We got to say, what is your purpose? Why are you there? Why do you exist, right? That's the meaning that you insert into that vessel over time, right? I get the other thing. Well, actually, you're going to ask about that anyway, so I'm not going to get ahead of you on that point.
I know. You also, in the book, you also talk a lot about experience design. And I think that's going to really resonate with the folks in the room here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what we did mathematically is connect the value of experiences to the value of brands. Once you intuitively go, oh yeah, all the experiences I have with a brand, to me, make up the value of that brand. Oh, I get it. Yeah, that's pretty easy to get. There's a lot of experiences you have with a brand, right? Certain brands, you have a tremendous number of experiences. Some you just have little fleeting ones, right? And they can be consuming an ad. It can be going to a store, going to an environment. Distill that all the way down to moments. Moments was a measurement of time before we had clocks and other such stuff, but it was essentially 90 seconds. So you have 90 seconds is a moment, right? In which hopefully a memory is made. If a memory isn't made, you don't exist. So I'll give you an example of a moment, and a really interesting, compelling moment. And this is also a good example for all of you who write a book. Whatever brands you put in your book, just know that they'll probably step on their poncho when your book is en route back, right? The example is from Uber, which is in the book. They publish the book and then they step on their poncho. But they have a good, compelling exiting moment. You went from cabs, right? When you got out of the cab, you had to pay, right? A good 90 seconds there. You get to Ubers, what happens? First Uber you took. You got out and you went, did I forget to do something? right? You stood there for a moment. Almost everybody had that same experience. And then you're like, I love this. I'm going to do this more. And you did it 5 or 10 times. Then you went back to a cab. The most miserable 90 seconds of your life is sitting in the back of that cab, right? We had someone on our staff who kept, every time we travel, I want to keep trying cabs. I got to keep cabs alive. Like, oh my goodness, it's so miserable. And I felt so pretentious, like 90 seconds, really? But that is an exiting moment. That powerful exiting moment, either you are or you're not, right? That's why cabs are going to have a tough time surviving. I just had the experience of going to Vancouver. If you get a chance to go to Vancouver, they are a leftover anomaly in that there are no Ubers, no rideshare. Doesn't exist. So here we are, business traveling like we normally do. We go to the airport, we get at the airport, we take a taxi down to the middle of Vancouver, and we're like, we're going to go to this nice restaurant, we hang out, not even nice, just a kind of good restaurant. And then, okay, so now how do we get back to our Airbnb? You call a cab. How the fuck do you call a cab? Has anyone tried to call a cab? I mean, we had to call it, we were on hold, sitting there trying to call the cab, right? As I'm trying to hail cabs, which there are not a lot of cabs in Vancouver, right? Oh, it was amazing to watch this economic anomaly, right? You can experience what it's like to not have an Uber and think, how did we live with this before this happened, right? Anyway, tangent.
What are some other examples, though, of that moment in value?
Right. It happens all over the place. If you think about any experience you have, right? Going to Italy, what is the moment within Italy? The entrance moment, the gelato moment, right? There are microcosms all over the place where you have these moments. Essentially, you're in the business, each of you are in a design firm, you're in the business of designing moments. That's what you're doing. You're hopefully designing memories, whether in home, in business, wherever it is, you're designing moments for people, right? And that's a higher order than designing stuff, right? Those are valuable things. People that, that stick in people's minds and they remember for a long time. They exist all over the place, right? We had a moment here. I have to say I had a moment when I come to this, this is an amazing conference, right? First time, 550 people. They have put it together impeccably, right? That green room is more active than I've ever seen a green room, and I see a lot of green rooms. It's very impressive what they've done. And then the lunch, which is really where a conference usually fails, and fails miserably, right? Because you got to get boxed lunches to 550 people. How are you going to pull that off, right? That was packaged. Wasn't that impressive? I mean, know that it's within the context of this. That was a moment for me. Like, that's what you nailed, right? The other one, if you go to any retail environment, if you want to figure out whether they've designed it precisely or they're really doing, go to the restrooms. Restrooms define whether a good design is there, right? The restroom sucks, not clean, right? That's how the world market did it. That's all that's. You always went, well, go to the restroom, see how clean they are. So, anyway.
So in addition to being in the business of creating moments, I know one of the things we were going to talk about was this idea that your firm is squarely in the ideas business. You are getting hired by clients to generate solutions for their businesses. And I think a lot of people in this room are also in the ideas business. They are selling a solution to clients. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how that works, how you make that work, how you walk into a room and say, here are my ideas, and you should pay me for them.
Right.
And how that works as a creative business, and how you see that working kind of across the industry.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting where this industry is relative to where our industry is, and they're not that different, but yet in different places. Mm-hmm. And my interactions have been fascinating to watch and observe. But so the advertising world is still, to a certain degree, a little bit paid by media, but that has moved into you're paid for your creativity, right? Mm. You're project-based, you're structured in a different way. We honestly didn't know any different. We came out of a place where there wasn't enough money to be made on the stuff that we provided. We had to get paid for our ideas, right, in order to survive. Structurally, I mean, it starts in just a basic way. You have to be able to step back and say, what I create has intellectual value. It's intellectual property. It's valuable for people to have this, right? I have to, if you do that, if you actually create something of significant value for people, they should have to pay for it. And they should have to pay for it up front, honestly, right? We are moving very fast into an experience economy. So, as I mentioned earlier, you're in the experience design business. You should be very close to the center of that. And that can very much happen because when we started our business 20 years ago, there were no chief design officers, right? We looked at design and said, it has got to have a place at the table. But in order to have a place at the table, you also have to be authentic about it. You cannot just make this shit up, right? You got to prove that design has value. You got to show it, research, all kinds of other methods. Sometimes in the world of design, like when you talk about Apple, people are like, well, Apple didn't do any research. That's bullshit. They did a lot of research. There's a lot of research that's done in design to build confidence. There's all kinds of methods for people to have confidence in design. Some designs you look at, well, it's just intuitive. Why didn't they just launch that immediately? It's intuitive now to you maybe, but not to the world, and not to necessarily a leadership team. So you have to do research to prove the value of design. So we combine those two things, research and design, to make sure that that value is proven out.
Well, one of the things we've talked a little bit about is this idea of moving from execution to ideas in the way that you structure your business and think about your business. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. It's the economics of how you get paid and what you put in front of people, and when they get to see stuff, when they get to see the excitement of a design, right? Because know that anybody that gets anywhere close to design wants to see it as soon as they can. So it's part of your responsibility to hold it back, keep it away from them as long as possible until they truly value it and want it more than anything, right? It's a competitive environment. It's hard to do that in some cases. It's hard to switch from making margin on products or physical things and making margin on ideas. But it's there. There's other industries that have gone before you, and it's possible to get there because you are valuable owners of brand that design experience for people. It has to be possible, right? You just have to step over the line.
So what are some industries you would point to that have made that transition? Because I think that's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah. Well, I mean, coming out our world, graphic design came out of that business, right? We don't make margin on physical stuff anymore, right? We used to make it on printing and all kinds of other stuff. That doesn't exist. Now, that wasn't the core of our business ever, or at least maybe the industry a little bit. Advertising was on media buying, right? I'm hearing a lot of it in the trade show industry. Trade shows moving out of that. And one of the things I've got to have the economic conversation with people, right? Be transparent about this is how I get paid, right? I can either get paid on the furniture that I sell you, or I can be paid on the stuff. I have to get paid, right? Anybody who's in a business or is close to business knows that you have to get paid. I'm not a nonprofit, though some days it looks like it. Thought about buying the .org, Capsule.org. Anyway, so I find those good for certain people, and other ones, they don't need that. They're already there. They get the value of design, and they know they have to pay for it up front. They just need a little nudge in that direction. So,
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to switch gears a little bit, and I think we're ready for a next slide. But you've done a lot of work with the outdoor clothing and gear brand Patagonia. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about what's so unique about the way they've positioned their brand in the marketplace and the work you've done for them.
Yeah, I wanted, obviously it's a big brand, but every brand starts tiny, right? It starts with one or a few people. So every brand is an example that can be related back to individuals or small businesses or any size of business. And Patagonia, as you probably know them as a sustainable, responsible brand, in that realm, and the projects that we've done for them over the years, one of the things that kept coming up was that they're a fashion brand. Right now, I don't want to insult Fashion Week or fashion brand, but if you say that in the world of Patagonia, in their offices on their commune, you'll get punched. And they're not a violent group, right? They are not a fashion brand. That has negative meaning in their world. They're a responsible brand. And they were getting a lot of that. Well, their brand had gotten bigger than their message and their responsible message. And so it kept coming up and a number of times, and now you see them pushing on that, right? They sued the president, or are still suing the president. They caused a trade show to move from Utah to Colorado, which is a massive impact on the economy of Utah. They gave the tax money back to the president, which is, if you look at the economics of giving that money back, they got far more unpaid media coverage for that than almost anything they've ever done. Right? So there was a wonderful economic model of giving that money back. They're an incredibly responsible brand and a good example for not just the two stools of form and function, but of mission or purpose. Why do you exist in the world?
Well, how did they get to that notion? I mean, how do you say, I'm going to give my tax credit back to the government? How do you realize that's the right thing to do for your brand?
That's a good question. Honestly, then the conversations we have with people around their brand and helping them understand their brand, the more you know it, the more confident you are with who it is, who you are and what it is, right? What is the existing meaning? By hearing more of that from us and from others, that they aren't seen as a socially responsible brand, I think it triggered more conversations to say, we need to do something. We need to have the confidence to be an activist brand like we are and push ourselves out there. So that applies to everybody here, right? Just the confidence in knowing yourself, knowing the brand you're building can have a powerful impact on making these really, really big decisions. It is in them already, right, as who they are. Culturally, they had to give up merino wool because the sheep were getting abused, and it came through the system. And while we were working on the project, I was in Tokyo, and all of a sudden came right down to the store level. They said, oh yeah, we're getting out of merino wool. Like, it just spread throughout the organization like that. It's gone, and we're getting out of it. This is like cutting off an arm in their business because merino wool is growing. It's a dramatic category for them, and it was gone. We're getting out of it. Once this season is out, we're going to find a new source, right? Culturally, it spread beautifully through the organization, and then they got on the problem and solved it, right? It's impressive when you design a really tight culture like that.
When you've also done, go ahead.
Go ahead. No.
You've also worked with Arc'teryx, which is another brand in the outdoor gear space.
Right.
And so I think
I don't know that we have
there are similarities, but also differences.
Oh, that's a nod to Fashion Week, right? So Patagonia is in between the left and the right, right? They're not the one on the left. That's what they associate with Fashion Week or fashion, and they're definitely not. Anyway, that's funny, and I don't need to get into the "Don't Buy This Jacket" campaign.
But Arc'teryx, I mean, they've built their brand and they are true to themselves in a different way, even though Arc'teryx and Patagonia are both in that same outdoor gear space.
Right.
And I know you've worked with both of them, so what are the similarities and what are the differences that set them apart from one another?
Yeah, so you could just look at it as the microcosm of buying a jacket and the brands and the difference of buying a Patagonia jacket. If you buy it and it gets damaged or something happens to it, you bring it back to their worn wear program and they will fix it and repair it, or they'll trade it in for you, all kinds of other things, right? They want you to wear that as long as possible, right? They want it to be a legacy jacket for you. We had ideas like you'd actually imprint your name, write your name in the inside of the jacket, and so when it's handed down, someone else would have and see that your name was written on your jacket, right? It's that kind, that's the Patagonia brand. Arc'teryx, it's built so it'll never tear. It'll never rip. I mean, this stuff is incredibly, impeccably well designed and put together. And they get about 25% more than Patagonia, North Face, and everybody else in this category. So while we're working with Patagonia, we're looking across the aisle admiring the fact that Arc'teryx gets this incredible margin because they spend more time thinking about it. They put more energy into the design of each individual artifact. So it will last. So, right? So they don't just have stuff they're just producing. So they're a more responsible brand in a different way. Does that make sense?
How can they each be true to themselves? What are the actions they can take that really help them differentiate themselves and make a stand in those two corners of the industry? Yeah.
It's really, Arc'teryx is more about design and engineering. So the engineering of the garments and the products, and being true to that. Everything they do until just recently is in-house. So they work things in an impeccable way. So it's off the charts, really well designed.
But they're not going to give their tax credit back to the government. How do they communicate those values then and stay true to who they are?
Right. Yeah, it has to, I mean, it's through the products, it's through the stores, it's through the places they show up, it's through the partnerships, it's through the entire ecosystem of where their brand is present and where it is not, right? It can't show up like, Patagonia and other brands in high-end outdoor have shown up at Costco, right? Through gray markets. They just can't be in there, right? They got to do everything they can to stay out of those environments because it has a negative impact on the meaning around their brand, right? Oh, I can get that on sale. I can get that extreme discount version of Arc'teryx. No, even on discount, Arc'teryx is expensive. It's like, I look at their stuff and I'm like, I can't afford that. There was a backpack that was $890. Maybe that's not a big deal. You're New Yorkers. You're like, backpacks, $890 is cheap for a backpack. Anyway.
Well, no, but with all of these brands, with all of these, different avenues to stay true to what your brand is and to build that brand, what for you is the ultimate secret of building a valuable, memorable brand?
It's in those designing meaningful moments. within a broader experience, right? If you haven't made a memory, they're gone, right? You've got to do that. There's a great memory guy, I think it was at Google or somewhere else, who did this incredible speech on memory and the fact that we lose the middle years of our memory are gone, right? Most of them we get when we're younger, and then most of them when we're much older. And it has to do with habits and patterns. So you want to break someone's habits or patterns. So this guy got up on stage and he had a goat with him. Just a goat. He didn't talk to the goat. He just held a little thing to the goat. He just held the goat. And a speech. I will never forget his speech because there was a goat there, right? And the message, around memory and all the stuff he talked about is all packaged up in that. I thought maybe I could find a goat. I could be up here and we could be up here with a goat, because then they wouldn't forget this at all, right?
That's true.
Because really, your audience members in the world, they have a lot of other stuff going on. And more than likely, they only remember 2 things from a day. 2 things. That's kind of shitty for you, because that is tough to get through and have them remember something, right? That's why I swear to shock value, because then they'll remember you in some way. This conference, there was a little bit of swearing earlier.
Yeah, we're okay.
It broke the ice. Yeah. So I hope in some way you remember the physics of brand in some form. But yeah, I'd say designing memorable, and emotion contributes to that in a big way, right? Contrast, all the things you do in design helps create memories. Unless you start to get too soft with it, or too boring with it, or too cautious with it, that's when you get into dangerous places, right?
I was going to say, though, we're also, we're looking at a brand like Arc'teryx, a brand like Patagonia. That's a huge brand. When you're smaller, when you're starting out, what are the first steps that you take, or when you're kind of halfway along your journey to getting to something with that kind of notoriety?
Right. I believe in small experiments. It's kind of been talked about a little bit here as it relates to digital and physical and some stuff. And it's one of the conclusions out of the book, like, how do you build a brand today? What do? You can't really buy an ad campaign. If you buy Facebook, you're probably going to get frauded upon, right? Because it's just robots. So how do you build a brand nowadays? What do you do? Go to events, hang out with people, right? You do small, controlled experiments, right? Or controlled in a reasonable sense. And they can be in any medium, physical or digital, but they have to be small as possible, but still be measurable. You can measure anything. That's the great thing about what we have in this digital environment, is you can measure the shit out of everything, right? If you measure the micro and see that it's showing up, you're making memories, people are interacting, you're seeing behaviors, because in behaviors is truth, you're getting somewhere. If you're not doing that, then let it go. But make it as small so it has less of an impact budget-wise, if there's anything entrepreneurial, it's the lean entrepreneurship approach, right? Or lean startup approach, right? Keep it small, little experiments, see if you're making memories, and then repeat. Edit and repeat on that. That's my view. It doesn't matter how big you are. Size doesn't matter when it comes to brands.
It's slower going, though, in the beginning, though, right? What's a reasonable expectation for kind of what that runway looks like?
This is funny, because I was thinking about that and related things as I'm going to Expo East, which is in Baltimore after this. And you walk around that show, and there's certain brands there that I've seen there for a number of years, and they're getting about 10 years old. And I want to walk up to them and say, just hold on. Just go as long as you possibly can, as long as the checkbook will get you there, right? Lack of resolve and grit and determination is what kills most businesses, right? People just give up. They're like, I just don't want to do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. That's the kind of stuff. So you have to keep going. And some say, I just saw a tweet that was about 10 years, right, that related back to bonobos, right? 10 years to build a brand. But I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, you got to make enough memories to hit the curve. And the curve comes when it starts to spread, right? And all of you having your memories, like, oh, I know that brand. I heard about them in 1995. Go 10 years back, and that's probably when they started. Not that it's 10 years, but somewhere around that, you have to. And then you get to scale. And that doesn't mean you have to have a business that goes to scale. There's plenty of types of business models that don't go to scale. If you're selling your hours, or if you're, you're a dentist, or you're doing the business, that doesn't have to scale. You can make a good lifestyle business and live a healthy life doing that, making a proper amount of margin, right? As long as you adapt to the marketplace and what's happening around you, which this industry in general there's some adaptation having to happen soon, I think.
I want to end on this note. What does success look like? How do you know when you've got it right?
When when people are showing up and you're not doing anything, right? I mean, you're getting the calls, you're getting the people to show up because of other things that they've seen and heard about and other stuff, right? It's kind of like porn, you know when you see it, right? Or you know when you feel it, right? People are just showing up. They're just calling us because of this or that or whatever. And you can do the rational stuff and you can study them, but to a certain degree, you get to a point where it just starts to happen, right? It rolls on its own, and it goes beyond you, which is, as an entrepreneur, that's rather important, right? You want to have something live on beyond you. You don't have to be the one pushing it. But you may have to push it for a long time, right? It's a big rock, and you have to keep it rolling.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank
this has
you.
been incredible. And
Thank
thank all of
you.
you for an incredible day.